Chapter 8. The Surprising Clue. The studio visitors made a mad scramble for safety. Chairs were overturned and electric cords tripped over as Nancy and the others scurried in every direction. They were not a second too soon. Pieces of glass and metal crashed to the floor and sprayed out for several feet. "Oh!" Beth cried, catching her breath. "Let's go before something else happens." "Oh, don't be a sissy," George spoke up. "I want to see some more filming." But George's desire was not to be fulfilled. The actors and actresses had had such a fright that all of them declared they could not work anymore that day. The director acceded to their wishes and postponed the rehearsal to the next day. Fran Johnson came to say goodbye to the girls. "I'm dreadfully sorry about what happened, but you'll soon see Waikiki Beach for real, and you'll find plenty of thatch-roofed huts on the islands." Nancy smiled. "And when the picture is released, we'll certainly go to see it." They thanked Fran for inviting them to the studio, then, with Hannah, took a taxi to the airport. Upon arriving there, Nancy glanced at her watch. "We have lots of time. I think I'll call Dad and find out how he is." While the others waited, she went to a telephone booth and put in a person-to-person call to Mr. Drew at the River Heights General Hospital. Presently, she was told by the operator that Mr. Drew was not there, so she gave the number of his club. A few moments later, her father answered. "Good to hear from you, Nancy," he said cheerfully. "I know you're going to ask me why I'm not in the hospital. Well, the truth is, the doctor has discharged me. I'm feeling fine. He won't let me start the trip for a couple of days, though. I promise to stay right here and rest." Nancy laughed. "I know you, Dad. You'll rest by staying on the telephone talking to clients or writing briefs." "Well, you wouldn't want me to die of loneliness without you, would you?" Mr. Drew teased. Then he became serious. "Nancy, I have some good news for you. That scrap of tweed cloth you found in my office proved to be a valuable clue. The police have nabbed the hoodlum who attacked me." "Oh, how wonderful!" Nancy exclaimed. "Who was he?" "The man belongs to the same gang of hoodlums as the ladder snatcher who is under arrest. This fellow was also hired by O'Keefe to cause trouble." Nancy asked her father if there was any report on O'Keefe himself. "Yes, the man who knocked me out corroborated the other fellow's story. O'Keefe has skipped town. The second prisoner says he has left the U.S. mainland." "For the Hawaiian Islands?" Nancy asked. "No one knows. He did not divulge his destination," the lawyer replied. The hoodlum said that O'Keefe was a collector of old jewelry and other small antique pieces. Apparently, he collects them without paying for them. Mr. Drew laughed softly. O'Keefe told the hoodlum that he had a special market for the pieces, but he didn't say what it was. Father and daughter chatted a few minutes longer. Both felt sure O'Keefe had stolen Mr. Milbank's ring. Then, with an affectionate, "See you soon, Dad," Nancy hung up. She rejoined her friends, who were amazed to hear the latest news about O'Keefe. Hannah grew and frowned. "I have a dreadful feeling that man is going to make more trouble for all of us," she said. "I don't know that as a chaperone I can cope with the situation properly." Nancy patted the housekeeper on the shoulder. "Please don't worry, Hannah," she begged. "You know all of us have been in tight spots before. We can handle this one," she stated confidently. A short time later, the travelers boarded the overseas plane. Their seats were on opposite sides of the aisle, but directly across from one another. Soon the fascinating Los Angeles skyline was receding in the distance. When darkness came, Hannah and the girls stretched out for a night's sleep. They awakened to a gorgeous sunrise which followed them for a long time. Finally, the Hawaiian Islands came into view. Up above them floated rose-tinted clouds, and here and there the travelers could see a mountain peak. Below, palm trees waved in the gentle morning breeze. The airplane landed smoothly. Nancy and her friends stepped out and began looking round for Mr. and Mrs. Armstrong. How could they ever find them, they wondered, in the mass of people awaiting the visitors. The arms of men and women were laden with colorful flower leis. As the girls went through the gate, a smiling couple walked up to Nancy. "Are you Nancy Drew?" the woman asked pleasantly. "Yes, I am, and you must be Mrs. Armstrong." The woman nodded as Mr. Armstrong introduced himself. At the same time, the couple began slipping leis over the shoulders of the River Heights group. For Nancy, there was one of white gardenias, a favorite flower of hers. "Thank you so very much," she said. "This is a wonderful greeting." There was no chance for any further conversation, for at that moment 3 young men rushed up to the girls. "Ned!" cried Nancy, as her tall, dark-haired, handsome friend came towards her. "Bert!" George called to the blonde, husky youth. "Dave!" exclaimed Bess in delight, looking up at the rangily built, green-eyed young man. The Emerson boys' arms also held leis, which they dropped round the girls' necks with quick kisses. Nancy's lei was made of pale pink plumeria, George's of baby anthuriums, and Bess's of orchids and carnations. Warm greetings were exchanged, and Nancy introduced the Armstrongs. As the group walked into the airport building to claim the travelers' luggage, Bess insisted that they were being followed. "Not again," George wailed. Bess was adamant. "I just know those 2 men I saw looking at us are members of the Double Scorps," she whispered to Nancy. "They've gone now." Ned overheard the remark and wanted to know what she meant by Double Scorps. Nancy explained quickly, adding that Bess might be right. "Then we're going to throw those snoopers off the trail," Ned declared. "Suppose we all go to the Halekulani, where we fellows are staying. We'll have a swim and maybe a sail. Those Scorps will think you've changed your plans. Later on, we'll drive out to Kaluakua." Mr. and Mrs. Armstrong were agreeable to this plan, and the whole group piled into their big saloon. As the travelers rode through the city of Honolulu, they were intrigued by the hustle and bustle of the modern capital of the islands. Streams of people poured into tall office buildings and department stores. Here and there, palm trees, waving in the soft breeze, shaded the sidewalks from the tropical sun. Presently, Mr. Armstrong stopped the car and pointed to the dark-colored statue of a man atop a high, square pedestal. "That is a likeness of King Kamehameha, first king of all the Hawaiian Islands. Before that, each island had its own king." Mr. Armstrong led the group to Iolani Palace nearby. Smiling, he said, "You know, this is the only palace in the United States." As they went inside the cool, stately, high-ceilinged building, he explained that parts of the palace were now used by the legislative branch of the government. But the throne room looks exactly as it did many years ago, although the throne and the chairs on either side of it are replicas. The originals are in the Bishop Museum. The visitors gazed at the beautiful paintings and draperies, conjuring up in their minds the grandeur of a bygone day when King Kamehameha had been seated on the throne in a gorgeous feather robe and headgear. "And now I think we had better go," said Mr. Armstrong, and led the way back to his car. A little while later, they came to the Waikiki beach area of Honolulu and turned into the driveway of an attractive garden which formed the grounds of the Halekulani Hotel. They parked in front of the main building, and Ned ran into the office to ask for another room for the boys to use that day. They had insisted that the girls use their private apartment in one of the cottages with its lovely lanai. Small suitcases belonging to Nancy, Bess, and George were carried to the ground floor apartment in the shady, flower-shrubbed grounds. "We'll meet you girls on the beach in 15 minutes, Ned said as the boys left them. The girls changed to bathing suits, then went to the front of the hotel which faced the ocean. Mr. and Mrs. Armstrong and Hannah Gruen were seated on the tree-shaded terrace. 3 feet below them stretched the white, sandy beach. "How absolutely heavenly!" Bess exclaimed happily. Mrs. Armstrong warned the girls that the tropical sunshine was very intense. She handed Nancy a bottle of suntan lotion and advised, "Better cover yourselves with this." Nancy and her friends had just finished spraying themselves with the lotion when Ned, Bert, and Dave appeared. As they walked down to the water, the visitors were fascinated by the surfboard riders a little distance away and by the twin-hulled sailing boats with their gaily colored sails. "I want you girls to go out in one of those catamarans," said Ned, "but let's swim first." The 6 young people thoroughly enjoyed diving through the waves, swimming out a distance, and riding back in on the combers. Presently, a catamaran with a red mainsail and a yellow jib pulled onto the beach. Ned spoke to the man at the tiller, and the group climbed aboard. They sailed about half a mile out, then turned towards Diamond Head. From this vantage point, the mainlanders could get a fine view of Waikiki Beach, with its skyscraper hotels, beautiful gardens, and fine homes. When they turned back towards the beach, George suggested that they all swim ashore. Nancy and Ned, the last to leave the catamaran, thanked the boat's owner for a fine sail, then headed for the beach. Reaching it, the pair sat down to dry off and talk. "Tell me in detail about your trip," Nancy requested. "Just what did happen to the plane?" "Actually, I'm not sure," Ned answered. "But I had a feeling that we were never in any great danger. The radio went dead, so of course we had no communication with any airports. First, one of our engines conked out, then another. At this point, the pilot decided that the best thing to do would be to turn back. While we were waiting at the Los Angeles airport for the motors to be put in shape again, something rather unusual happened, Nancy. A man came up and asked if he might join our group." Ned went on to say that the man explained he had missed the commercial flight to Honolulu, and it was imperative he get to the islands as soon as possible. His papers and identification were in order, so there was no reason to refuse him. But somehow I didn't like him. Nancy, he had a habit of drumming on windowsills, chair arms, and tables with his fingertips. It made us nervous. Hearing this, Nancy sat up very straight. Looking at Ned intently, she asked, "And did this man raise his forefingers and touch them together?" It was Ned's turn to look surprised. "Yes, he did, Nancy. For Pete's sake, how did you know that?" End of Chapter 8.